next speaker for the day is Rishi Jain, who will be speaking on the Achilles heel of a Rails developer upgrading Rails app. Rishi is an engineer at Labs. He has written some great blogs, including Learning Shall Never Stop, a blog about everything he learns. In his talk today, we will get answers to some of the common questions and best practices of upgrading Rails. Please welcome Rishi on the stage.
Thank you for the introduction. My name is Rishi Jain. I work at this company called Labs. We'll talk about it in a bit. I'm glad to be here. I'll be talking about upgrading your Rails application. And by the end of it, my hope is that your journey of upgrading your Rails app will be slightly less painful or more fun, however you look at it. I find it a lot of fun. The last time I was at RUBYCONF, that was back in 2019. That happened in Bangalore. I happened to have my parents there on the first row attending the conference for my talk. This time I have my wife here sitting in the front row attending the conference. So it's a bit of a tradition going on here. Cool. So I work at this company called Labs. A little bit about the company, Labs. So Labs, it's a remote work team, a fully distributed team with people working all over the places from the world. And one of our offering, amongst many offerings, is Rails upgrade services, and we do it under the name of fastruby.io. So if you're somebody who's planning to upgrade Rails or have done it before, chances are you'll end up Googling stuff and you'll land up on one of our blogs, and that might help you out. So before we even get to how to upgrade Rails, where do you start? The first question is, why do we even bother upgrading Rails, right? So the first reason, security fixes. So throughout the year, some security issues are reported, which are called as CVEs, which is common vulnerability and exposures. So the Rails team keep on releasing versions of Rails throughout the year, which have fixes for these security issues. And the agenda is simple, right? You want your apps to be safe. That's why you need to upgrade Rails. So you have these security fixes in place. This is from the last release of Rails. So if you notice that they have released 4 different versions of Rails: 7.0.3.1, 6.1.6.1, 6.0.5.1, and 5.2.8.1. So if you're somebody whose app is on, let's say, Rails 5.2.7, chances are your app is vulnerable, and you need to upgrade it to 5.2.8.1 at the most. The second reason, new features. So the Rails team, among security fixes, also when they release major and minor versions of Rails, they do release major features along with it. For example, when Rails 5.2 came out, they released active storage. When Rails 6.0 came out, they released action mailbox. Let's talk about active storage as an example. It's basically a library which helps you with file uploads. So if you're somebody who is, let's say, on Rails 5.1 or Rails 4, whatever, so chances are you'll end up using one of the famous gems called Paperclip for file uploads. But the problem with that now is that Paperclip is deprecated. The team is not maintaining that gem anymore. And if you happen to have some bugs or some security issues, you happen to come across them, you're pretty much on your own, right? Unless you find some solution in some of the fork of Paperclip which is going on. But yeah, it could be a troublesome road. So your next solution could be, hey, let's upgrade to active storage. Let's start using that. But for that, you need to upgrade your Rails. The third reason, Ruby upgrade. At this point, you might be thinking, isn't Rails upgrade enough? Do we really have to upgrade Ruby as well? Well, think about it. With Ruby upgrades, you get performance improvements and access to new features. So for example, when Ruby 3.0 came out, they introduced performance boost and better concurrency. So if you're somebody who wants to access that performance boost, you need to migrate your Ruby from whatever you are on to Ruby 3.0. So that means if you're somebody on Rails 4, you can't really start using Ruby 3 directly, right? You need to be at least on Rails 5.2. So you need to upgrade. So there's a dependency between Rails and Ruby. So you need to upgrade your Rails for that reason. Alrighty. So the next question is, should we upgrade now, right? The answer could be, yes, we should, because I gave you a whole monologue. But no, the answer, it depends. At this point, it could be you. Just give us a simple yes or no, guys. Why make it complicated? Well, let's look at it. What make your app ready for an upgrade? The first, test suite, very important. So the question here is, do you even have test suite, right? So I have seen apps which 0 literally 0% code coverage. So if you have a test suite, what is your testing strategy? What is your testing strategy? Are you dependent on manual testing? Do you have a mix of automated testing, manual testing? So you need to figure out your testing strategy for it. The second one is code coverage. Let's say I ask you, do you have test suite? You say, yes, I do have. And then the next question is, do you have a code coverage? What's your code coverage? And your answer is 20%. Then that's not good enough, right? So you need to have a good code coverage when you're upgrading Rails. 80% is considered decent for a complex application, which covers all your critical parts. So code coverage is another factor which makes your app ready for an upgrade. The next one is CI solution. So what is the testing strategy here, right? Are you running all your tests locally? Because that can take a lot of time, depending, again, on the size of the application, kind of test suites you have written. So what is your CI strategy there? Having that also helps you along the way. And another important priority, is Rails upgrade a priority for you? It can't be a secondary task, guys. Because the problem is that it leads to long-running upgrade branches, right? Think about it. If you have a developer who's working on Rails upgrade with a secondary mindset, that means you work on the main features, upgrades you do whenever you have some time. It just can't work out like that, because that developer will end up rebasing or merging conflicts all the time, and that branch will be left after long ago. So I've given you a whole set of good to have things, right? These are not the rules. I have seen people upgrade apps with 20% test coverage as well, and it's been a successful upgrade. So it doesn't mean that you can't upgrade if you don't have all these set of criterias. It's just that if you have them, that will make your journey less painful. Alrighty, now getting to the weeds of it. How do you even start the upgrade? The first thing that you need to do is decide the version jump. So the basic rule of the thumb is that you do one major jump at a time, you do one minor jump at a time. So for example, if your current Rails version is 5.2.6, the first thing that you need to do is go to the latest patch of that current major minor combination. So the latest patch for 5.2 is 5.2.8. So you need to blindly go to that, run your test sheet, do your testing, and just deploy to production, and it should work fine, because patch versions usually don't have any breaking changes or API changes. It's usually fixes for bugs and security issues. So go to the patch first. That's the first basic step. The second, now you are on 5.2.8. So the next major jump is 6.0. So you go to 6.0, and also you go to the last patch of that series, for the same reason that you have all the security fixes already there. So you go to 6.0.5. Now, the next one is 6.1.6. Because I can't go to Rails 7.0 directly. I'll go to the next minor jump of that series, which is 6.1.6. That's how you decide the version jump. The next, Git flow, right? So again, this is not a standard answer. This is not something which has been written that you do it this way and you'll be successful. It depends what your team is comfortable with. It depends how you have been doing your Git flows until now. I'll give you an example of what I did with one of my client projects. So the client had a main branch, and the project was on Rails 5.2.6, and I was supposed to go to Rails 6.1. So as I spoke, we'll go to the next major version, which is 6.0. So I created a branch out of that main branch, which is Rails 6.0. And all work that I do now the PR goes into the Rails 6.0 branch. And I keep on rebasing this Rails 6.0 branch with the main branch to keep it updated with the latest changes which are going on. Again, this was not that you have to follow this. This is something that you figure out on your own what works best for you. Now, what is next? Dual booting. So before we get into how do you dual boot, let's talk about what is dual booting. It's basically ability to run two different versions of Rails app with one common code base. It can sometimes feel like this. Yes. Why? Why do you even have to dual boot? It gives you abilities, bunch of them. First, for example, RSpecs. As a testing strategy or as a framework, let's talk about RSpecs. It works with everything. But RSpecs, when you have RSpecs, basically you can run RSpecs for different versions of Rails. So you're not creating different projects. You're creating just a different branch, Rails 6.0. But if you're on that branch and if you came across a bug, right? So the first thing you would do is you check if this test suite actually passes in Rails 5.2 as well in my current main branch. Because if it's failing there as well, it's not an upgrade issue. It's some other issue which you can ask some other developer to look at, right? So it gives you ability to run two different test suites for two different versions of Rails. Configuring CI. Again, if you have a CI solution and it runs, let's say it takes you 20 minutes to run the whole test suite. So you can basically configure a CI in a way where you can say that, okay, hey, run all my test suite for Rails 5.2 first, and then if that passes, go to Rails 6.0. So you get the whole picture in one CI or in one PR request. The next one is simple Git conflicts. So again, I talked about long-running upgrade branches, right? So with dual booting, we'll see how it helps with simple Git conflicts. But basically, it helps you with less rebasing and less merging of the code and avoiding less Git conflicts. So, and we'll talk about it further. Now, the important part, how do you dual boot? So of course, in Rails, there's a gem for everything. So there's a gem called Next Rails. So Next Rails, we at OmbuLabs have built this gem, and we continue to maintain this gem. And I'll tell you how it works. So basically, every Rails project have a gem file. So that when you initiate the gem Next Rails, what it does is it basically creates a symlink of your gem file called gemfile.next, which basically signifies that this is my next gem file for the next version. And dual booting that gem Next Rail gives you a way to bundle install for two different gem files that you have now, gemfile and gemfile.next. So obviously, it creates two different log files as well, one for your gem file, one for your next file. And that's how it basically differentiates. And what else, apart from dual booting, does this gem helps in other things as well? Yes, it helps you to write conditional code. Basically, and I'll show you a snippet of it. The second thing is, it gives you command line option to run specs, and even more. The specs thing I already showed you, that you can run R specs for two different versions, and this gem helps in that. The next one is deprecation tracking and incompatibility report, and we'll come into more. Now look at this code, right? So basically, if you look here, you see a block with an if-else condition where it says, if next, my gem version is 6.05 for Rails, else my Rails version is 5.2.4, right? So this is something which the gem Next Rail provides you. So basically, what I can do is, I can write all my code in the gem file like this. So now here it helps with Git conflicts. If you're somebody who's not using this, right, and you have a branch, let's say you have some other branch without dual booting, and your main branch is also very active in terms of changes in that, that means you'll end up resolving a lot of Git conflicts for gemfile.log, and that could be a pain, right? The next one, rspec. So this is my regular rspec command. All I do is I prepend this keyword called next. So with this one command, I'm basically saying rspec to run this test suite for my next version of Rails. And if I remove this command, it will run for my current version of Rails. That means in one branch with one code base without changing anything, I can just run two different specs. I can just run one spec for two different versions of Rails. And it's easier to debug that way. Think about it. You have a failing spec. And let's say you want to test what kind of object it is coming, what class it is, right? So you might end up doing puts. I've shamelessly put puts everywhere in the code base. So the problem is, like, if you have to change branches, that means you have to make that code change everywhere. And that's just not a smooth process. So with this Next Rails gem, we can do that. Again, I talked about more command line options. So I want to start my server with, with my next version of Rails. Or I want to do Rails console with my next version of Rails. I can do this with this keyword, with this simple command, next. Alrighty. So what is the other part? What is next after dual booting? So the next thing is finding incompatible gems. So incompatible gems are basically gems that will not work with your target Rails versions, right? So think about it. Let's say you have a gem A, which is dependent on active record, let's say 5.2, right? And now you're moving to Rails 6.0. So obviously, active record will also move to Rails 6.0. But now this gem A is no more compatible with active record 6.0. So you need to find all such gems because it will not bundle install, right? So it's very hard to do that manually because gem files can be any sizes. So it could be really difficult. So Next Rails provides you that ability, how to do that. It gives you the simple command saying bundle report compatibility, and you pass in your target Rails version. And it gives you a beautiful output. And let's look at the output. It gives you the first output, where it says, I'll show you all the gems with versions which are compatible with your target Rails versions. So if you look at this output here, at the snippet here, it says accounting gem 0.0.1 can be upgraded to 0.1.1, which will make it compatible with Rails 6.0. So it's as simple as finding this set of gems and changing a gem file and moving on. The next set of output it gives is gems which have newer versions but those newer versions are also not compatible with your target Rails version, right? So look at core model 0.0.1. It says it has a newer version called 0.0.4, but still not compatible with Rails 6.0. So you need to figure out a strategy for them. And we'll look at it. The third output it gives you is gems, which even have like no newer versions, and your current version is also not compatible with your target Rails version. So you need to figure out what to do about this, right? You've added this gem for a specific reason. So you need to maybe create your own next release for this, or maybe replace the gem, something like that. Alrighty. The next thing is backward compatible changes. So what are backward compatible changes? These are changes basically which are compatible with your current Rails version and also compatible with your target Rails version. For example, let's look at this query, the first query, project.someScope. So when Rails 6.0 came out, it says that, hey, it has some vulnerability. It's possible to MySQL injection. So to fix this, all you need to do is put your query inside the arl.sql parameters, and it should work. So this is a simple change, but this change, arl.sql, this change works with Rails 5.2, works with Rails 6.0. So that means this change is backward compatible. That means it helps you, and one more thing, it helps you keeping your Rails branch, Rails upgrade branch lean as possible. And we'll look at how. So, sorry, I showed you the Git flow, right, which I followed. So in that Git flow, I basically showed that I'll send all my upgrade changes to Rails 6.0 branch. But not with this one, because this one is backward compatible. So I'll set this change against my main branch. I'll merge this change. I'll rebase my Rails 6.0 branch. So that means my Rails upgrade branch becomes smaller. So that means it's easier to review, easier to test, easier to merge. Alrighty. The next one is deprecation changes. What are these deprecation changes? Let's look at this screenshot. Now, give me like a show of hands if you've seen deprecation, if you've observed your application logs and you've seen deprecation warning all over. Show of hands, please. Who have seen that? Already, cool. Who has fixed that? Alrighty, few still hands. I am guilty. I have seen those warnings, I have not fixed it. I'm guilty of those until I started actually working on an upgrade project, right? So this is what deprecation warning looks like. The question is, where do you find them? Obviously, in your application log, you can do a grep search. It always starts with deprecation warning : so you can do like a grep search for it, get a list of all the warnings that you want. But the problem is like application log from your local environment, it would only have a limited amount of log, right? So you want to go ahead and find that on production. But your production log can be huge. It could be hard to even find all the deprecation warnings. So active support provides us a way where we can just plug in saying that, hey, when you came across a deprecation warning, notify us. And just plug in a notifier which can send you a mail with all the details of the log. The next question is, okay, now I know how to find them. So how do we fix them? Let's look at that warning again. It says, NOR conditions will no longer behave as NOR in Rails 6.1. To continue using NOR, not each conditions manually have to be added, right? So the query here is author, where, and I'm doing a not parameter with the two different query parameters, right? So all I have to do, the deprecation warning tells you how to fix them, and it's usually simple. All I have to do is change my code from the first line to the second line, and the behavior remains the same. As simple as that. It's just that we are too lazy. We keep observing the deprecation warning, and they're warnings, they're not errors, so we ignore them. Alrighty. So the next question is, let's say you have a team of developers working on your upgrade. You have a team who's also working actively on your main branch, on features and stuff. So it could very well happen that here, as an upgrade engineer, you are fixing these deprecation warnings, and your other team members are not even aware of the changes you're making, and they keep on adding the deprecated code. So it becomes your life. You get a deprecation warning, you fix it, you get another one, you fix it, and it's frustrating end of the day. So how do you avoid this? Like one way is you can obviously go and tell them that, hey, don't do this. But come on, you can fix maybe 10 deprecation warnings. You'll tell maybe 7 about it, like don't make these mistakes again. They'll probably remember 2 of it, right? So the mistakes will happen. It just doesn't work out. So again, active support again provides you a way to even plug in the disallowed warnings, where you can say that, okay, unique as a keyword is not allowed anymore, as a method is not allowed anymore, And when your main branch actually happen to come across this, it will, instead of a warning, it will give you an error there. And they can right there know that, okay, something is wrong, I need to figure out what it is. And there you come in as an upgrade engineer and tell them, this is a wrong behavior. Alrighty. What are the other changes apart from all the changes that I've done? Or is this it? So, you should also look at the Rails official upgrade guide. So if you're somebody who's jumping from 5.2 to 6.0, you will have a section there which will tell you all the changes that have been done in that jump, and then the changes that you need to make. So that's the next step that you should do. Before doing all of this, then you should get into this. Alrighty. Now, let's say you have made all your changes. What is my testing strategy, right? So think of it like a feature release. You run your test suite, you find some bugs, so you file them, you fix those bugs, you run your test suite again. It's as simple as that. But it's very important to make sure that you're tracking those bugs that you're coming across, tracking those spec failures that you're coming across, because it's easy to get lost in them. Depending on the size of the project, it can be a lot. The next one is deployment and observation. So when I say observation, you've deployed your code, it works fine, right? For 1 hour, you've tested, it works fine. And you go ahead and declare it that, hey, Rails has upgraded, and we're awesome, and everything is great. Don't do that. Observe for a week. All your metrics, your memory consumption, your health of the application, observe every single thing, because it can happen that after upgrade, your memory is consumed it has increased by a lot. So you need to figure out why it has increased. So observe for a week before you call it a success. And yeah, if you happen to find bugs in production, what is your plan, right? Do you roll back? Do you fix? Again, think of it like any other release. So if you find a bug, you basically observe that, okay, can I fix this bug quickly enough? Can I test this bug quickly enough? If yes, you don't roll back every release that you find bugs in. You fix it. You move ahead. It goes the same here. Let's say if you come across a bug and you just don't know where it's coming from, you just don't know what the solution to is, and a core of your users are actually facing downtime in your application, then maybe it's time to do a rollback, go ahead and try to fix it in your backyard and then come back later. Yeah, this is it. I hope this talk had made you learn something new, and thank you for being a good audience. And if you have any questions after this talk, you can reach out to me personally or on Twitter later on. And if you want us to upgrade your app, you can reach out to us at fastruby.io. And yeah, thank you.